Westminster Insider at Politico Europe, Sasha O'Sullivan. So a very good morning to both of you. We'll be chatting in just a moment. First, I'm going to take everyone through all the front pages, first of all, and we'll kick off with the Mail on Sunday. The arrest and suspension of Labour MP Dan Norris in connection with allegations of rape and child sex offences is the lead story for the paper there. And that story is also the lead item in today's Sunday Telegraph. The Sunday Mirror too makes MP Dan Norris's arrest its main front page item. The Observer says Prime Minister Keir Starmer has ordered a major rethink of government economic policy in case Donald Trump's trade tariffs do lasting damage to the UK. While the Sunday Times reports that Russian sensors designed to gather information about British nuclear submarines have been found in UK territorial waters. So let's get stuck into some of those stories now. A proper hello to both of you. So we are actually going inside to start off in this hour, and you've picked out a story, Sasha, in The Sun, which reflects on the fact that today is the day that national insurance for employers goes up.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting into the middle of the papers to start us off. So this is an interesting one where it's basically saying, you know, the national insurance contributions, which will come in today, are going to really hurt our high streets. And you've got a bunch of kind of, you know, industry groups from Make UK, which represent the manufacturers, to the British Retail Consortium, say, you know, this plan was to raise taxes ostensibly without raising taxes on working people. And they're saying, well, but you are going to raise taxes on working people. We're going to have to freeze the number of people who we normally recruit. This is going to change the nature of high streets, which are already struggling, and give people, you know, a real sense of buy-in into their community and a sense that a place where they can come together. And 70% of hospitality businesses are saying they're going to have to reduce employment levels, and this will be a real challenge for them from today.
Which is also picked up in, Ava, the Express, isn't it? Struggling pubs face a £180 million tax bombshell. They're also talking about other with the rising level of the living wage as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, the government would say we've kept our promise about not raising taxes on working people, and we had to do something. They talk about the economic legacy that was passed to them. They say we needed to put money into the NHS, for example, and we had to make tough choices.
Yeah, the pub story is a little bit more tricky, I would say, than the high street, because this is Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride, who is outside the Two Chairmen in Westminster, which is sort of the famous pub where Rachel Reeves, after she's done the autumn statement or she's given the statement, that's where she will go and have a drink and celebrate with her civil servants. So it's an important pub, I would say, for the area. But the Chancellor, Shadow Chancellor here, is arguing that there's a lot of facts and figures here that I can't really work out. I can't really work out what they pertain to. He's talking about £4,000 extra on average, and which will result in lower wages. I don't really know where he's calculated that figure for, if that's for the year or the month. There's also £180 million tax bombshell. For who? Is that pubs altogether? What's the time frame there? It just sort of feels to me that the Conservatives, having been in power for 14 years, neglected our pub industry and our hospitality by doing things like shooting up the cost of energy, which was an extreme inconvenience would be a soft word, I suppose.
They would say that
pubs.
was down to the war in Ukraine.
They would say that, but, you know, it didn't happen in France. France were able to absorb, the government there was able to absorb a lot of that cost. It didn't go onto the hospitality sector or onto consumers. You've also got the issue of rising business rates, which happened under the Conservatives, and you had rising rents. So pubs are now sort of in this impossible situation where they are in a time bomb, and this national insurance hike is only an extra straw, really, on the camel's back. You know, pubs have been closing now at a rapid rate for quite some time.
I mean, there are a lot of pressures on businesses, aren't there? And while the government promises to protect working people, the feeling that they would say is that working people will suffer if they do lose their jobs as a result of some of the tax rises.
Absolutely. And, you know, the people who own pubs, you know, when we think about national insurance contributions, we tend to think about big businesses and big employers. The people who own pubs would say, yeah, we're small business owners, we're working people too, and we're going to be feeling this through the cost of our businesses and through the cost of our staffing.
Let's move on to the Sunday Times next, shall we? Because this front page here, Sasha, is focusing, I mean, the main story is about a Kremlin, a potential spy story, but across the banner head, Starmer to admit globalisation has failed as tariff war wages. And it feels like we're getting a bit of a shift in language, certainly, from the government in the aftermath of Donald Trump bringing in tariffs. And it kind of relates to what we were saying before, because there's a feeling that perhaps something might change as far as businesses are concerned to protect them.
Absolutely, and it's been really fascinating actually to watch the language being used out of Number 10 change over the course of really a few short days, from the initial kind of shock last week when the tariffs were announced by Trump pretty much quite late. Number 10 was saying, you know, keep calm, we're going to keep negotiating, thinking that there would be a way through this for the UK, thinking that the 10% baseline tariff was something that was, you know, could be managed, to where we are now, where Starmer's basically saying we're in a different world and we have to act like we're in a different world. He is saying that globalization has failed. He's saying, you know, our economic order has to shift. And that may well look like things like breaking those, you know, ironclad fiscal rules which Rachel Reeves set out in the October budget last year. You know, here they're talking more about doing more trade deals with places like Australia, where we already have a free trade deal, a new free trade deal with Japan, which was signed originally in 2021, was kind of lifted from what we'd used previously with the EU. So saying you've got a kind of two-pronged approach here of we are going to have to rethink our own domestic orders, but also how we trade with other countries. How do we how do we fix the trade which we will lose to the US, which we will? You know, Jaguar Land Rover saying that they're not going to send cars to the US anymore. So we're going to have to find other trade allies in different ways. And that may mean more agreements which actually set out the terms of trade much more specifically.
So there's the issue of trade deals, and the government would say they're still negotiating hard to try and get one with the US as well as those other countries. But there's also, the Prime Minister's also written in the Sunday Telegraph and talked about how he stands ready to protect businesses against the impact of Donald Trump's tariffs. But also there's this sense of this language of the world has changed. Do you think that if they do relax their economic policy, they perhaps relax their fiscal rules, they can make a convincing argument for that, given that the global situation change and the threat to the economy?
Well, the Observer has interpreted that line of old assumptions should be discarded in quite an interesting way. So, you know, I originally perceived that to mean that means the global order has changed and therefore we need to change how we're doing trade. The Observer has said that Starmer allies are suggesting that Rachel Reeves might slap on more taxes, which would be absolutely extraordinary on the back of the spring statement and the news that we're cutting PIP payments and other welfare payments and this national insurance hike that we're about to experience, well, from today. Rather extraordinary. But in terms sort of I mean, he's written in the Telegraph about the global order and things must change and he's going to protect businesses. I don't really see how he's going to do that unless government is going to absorb some of the cost and unless he brings in, say, a new tax, say perhaps something like a digital services tax, which means that the tech industry would have to pay a fair share of tax in this country and then perhaps that could be shared out amongst the businesses who are struggling now to export to America. But there's nothing actually particularly bold in that Telegraph article, and I wonder if it's more sort of rhetoric and sort of fingers crossed that everything might get better rather than some bold ideas. Well,
yes, and some of the suggestions that the Telegraph is making is sort of measures to reduce red tape and perhaps relax some regulations to help businesses, not necessarily sort of bigger moves like tax rises. It's hard to interpret at this stage.
Well, and that's a very interesting point that Ava makes, is that it's quite a vague article, actually, and basically every newspaper has interpreted in the way that they want it. The Telegraph has taken it to mean, you know, we'll take away more red tape, which is something that they've talked about and engaging with businesses more. The Observer saying it could mean tax rises, and the Times about globalisation.
OK, we are out of time for the moment, but Ava and Sasha, good to see you, and you'll be back again in the next hour, so we'll see you again then. Thanks very much.
Sky News get the full story first.